Okay, let's do a little bit of introspection. Make sure we're all in the right mindset here. I talked about in the first day of class the kind of 4 areas of a developer. One is that we've got the tech going. You guys feel like your tech's going all right? Yeah. Okay. Not too crazy. Awesome. Number 2 is we want to make sure that we have art. Feeling the art yet? It's a little hard to feel art with server configuration and stuff like that. Today we'll talk about a little really quickly, like how you want to organize your directory structure. That actually is very much an art form. How you actually want to organize your files and manage that. If you don't get that right, man, if you get it right, then everything kind of gets into the flow and works better. That's definitely probably what I say is the first part of art and what was after that. All right, and then we've also got our discovery. Have you been discovering way more than you ever wanted to? Hopefully that's true. And I hope that actually, if I can get you to get anything out of this class, it's that kind of discovery principle. Actually, I want you to do all 4 of them, but I'm going to say this is the most important one right now because I'm talking about it. But discovery. So like, for example, when you get certbot, did you sit there and inspect it like, what did that thing just do? Like, I ran this thing certbot, and there's this little copy and paste thing, and I have no clue what that thing actually did. And did you say, I need to go in like Google Ads and figure it out? No, nobody did that. Did anybody do it? No. You did. Awesome. Well, did you get your answer? No. It was it was totally unrewarded. It was miserable. Like first I actually didn't know about certbot. I knew the technology behind certbot. It's Let's Encrypt is the company who actually did that. Which is actually a free nonprofit organization, it's not a company. But it's fascinating. I mean, before Let's Encrypt actually made it so that certs were easy to get, that was a nightmare. Not just a nightmare of like management, but also super expensive, super painful, caused websites to go down all the time, and it really encouraged people to not make a secure web. So you basically had all these just unencrypted conversations going on all over the world, which anybody can just read if they have access to the network. So totally awesome what they did. And they simplified it down to this one little command so they put the certbot flag. It's all done. Yeah.
So when you say unencrypted conversations, when it's not encrypted, that means that some over computers over the internet, but they're not encrypted.
It's the communication that's not encrypted. So your computer is still safe, assuming that you're not actually opening up some sort of exploit where they can come in and take control of your computer. But the communication, so the data that's there, could you imagine like if Facebook wasn't doing encrypted conversations, like every Facebook post would go through literally, if you do a trace route with the utility and run, you can see all the servers it jumps through to see you who you're talking to, and it will be dozens of servers. You know, a lot of them are like ISPs and things that you consider safe, but you have no idea, especially if you're on like a Wi-Fi network, you have no idea who else is on that network with you. And you really, that's not a good thing.
Network, they're able to be.
Yeah, you can actually, you see the tool, this tool called Wireshark, and you can pull it down and you can actually see all the packets, all the conversations, all the stuff that's happening on the network. If those connections are encrypted, they'll be garbage. If they're not encrypted, you can read it all. So total aside there, important thing was discovery. You got to cultivate that idea of like, when you see something like, wow, that's weird, I have no idea what that thing does. Take a minute, assuming it's not due, it's not 3 in the morning. Actually, that's usually the time it's 3 in the morning. And just go Google it and try and understand what is it doing back there. You're going to see that with all of the technologies that we have, you know, with CSS and HTML and JavaScript, Vue, especially like, what is Vue doing? I know how CSS works and how JavaScript works, but what is it doing? How's that actually work? And actually studying that a little bit, just dig in a little bit, and you'll find that your ability just goes like through the roof. Your peers won't understand those things because they didn't take that little extra effort to discover. Awesome. What about social? You guys feel comfortable with each other? We're all friends. We're all on team startup together. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. You know, we should like throw a party or something like that. That'd be cool. Awesome. Okay. Oh, and the last introspection, because I do have to really hurry, is why are you here? So answer that question again for yourself, re-ask it again to yourself. Hopefully it's beyond just to get a grade. Hopefully it's like, I just got to get out of school. It's more like, I really want something a little bit deeper. And that's going to be different for everybody, but dig in and ask, why are you here? That'll totally motivate you. All right, here's what we got coming up. We got class today. Hopefully everyone took the HTML quiz. I was talking with one of the students earlier, it's like, yeah, they wanted double quotes instead of single quotes. I know, sorry.
Yeah.
Stupid.
What's the difference between that? 'Cause the first time I did it was single quotes.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't sure what the difference was.
Yeah, so the HTML spec says you can use either.
Oh, so they do the same thing?
They do the exact same thing.
Got it.
It's really, so the only time so the important thing is to pick one or the other, like, and just be consistent with it. The worst thing you can ever do is have code that's like half this and half that. And you're always like, so just pick one or the other and be consistent with it. Usually you'll have like a pretty printer on your editor and it will just do it for you. So like mine, if I do double quotes, it'll switch them over to single quotes for me. Yeah.
Did you turn off the front mic by chance so that we can see
Is it hard to read?
in the back?
I didn't want to turn off because I was afraid you were going to fall asleep. I can only see you. Is that better? All right. See, JJ's always got your back. I'm always like, no, I'm not doing that. But if is it Jose? No. What's your name? Vid? Vin? Like in Mistborn? Like in Mistborn? Like in Mistborn? Vin, V-I-N?
V-I-N-H.
V-I-N-H. But you pronounce it Vin? That's the coolest thing ever. That's cool. All right. So back to the point. Take the quiz. Don't get hung up on it. You can take as many times as you want. In fact, just get really good. You're like playing Pong or something like that. You can get done in 30 seconds. My high score is 1 minute, so let's see if we can beat that. We're going to talk about getting HTTP today. So I'm going to try to get HTTP. Doubt I'm going to get to that. I practiced this like several times now, and there's way too much to talk about yet. I want to make sure you guys have a really firm understanding of that. So if we don't get to HTTP, realize that that is not something I don't think is important. It's super important. In fact, I wish I could spend an entire class on HTTP because it's super, to understand how that works will make a huge difference in actually knowing how to do web programs. So tomorrow you got your development workflow with Git view, then you got understanding HTTP. That's like the worst exercise ever. You have to take a screenshot of the networking page. Okay. That's how you demonstrate your knowledge of HTTP. It's like, oh, screenshot. Yeah. So please, if you want to discover, dig into that one. HTTP is a great thing to know really well. And then we're going to do web server configuration. So let's make some mistakes. We're going to dive right in. I'm going to go to the end and do that one first because I can get it out of the way really easily, I think. So activity number 9, how do you configure your web server? Nope, we're not going there yet. So let's make sure I'm looking at this right. Yep. Just copy that while I'm here. All right, I'm going to blow up my little screen here, and I'm going to use Control-R to find my SSH command. And I've just shelled into my server, my little rented server, right? Okay, so most of you, I think there's only like less than like 5% of people who haven't actually set up their server yet. So is there anyone in this room who isn't currently in? No, I don't even want to know. Most of you have set it up. What you're going to need in order to do this, and hopefully you did as part of that, you ran certbot already once. And you did that so that it would mangle, not only get your certificate, but also mess with the Nginx configuration to put your domain name actually in there. So you've done that exercise once. Yeah, question.
Is it supposed to be certified? Because normally it just says the domain, but
so when you use certbot, it's for getting a certificate for a host name, right? IP addresses don't even enter into that equation at all. All it's saying is that when you're in the browser and you go to a website and you think you're going to www.google.com or google.com, that there's a certificate that says this is actually google.com. All it's doing. That's super important because if you didn't have that certificate from a trusted authority that said you were actually at Google, then it could be any website you wanted to be, and you wouldn't have any idea. You can spoof those addresses and actually make it look like it's coming from you, but it's actually from something like that. So certificates are super big, but it's all that name is the one that you actually think you're going to. Because you're like a Git master, you're running on the air check. That's okay. You're a Git master, totally get it. Okay, does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if you were doing like certbot with your IP address, 12.6.4, it will actually generate you. Maybe I've never done that. Maybe generate your certificate for it, but it's really giving you a certificate for something nobody ever will call you with, right? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so there's two important directories that you need to know with Nginx. Remember, Nginx is the web server, just like your Node HTTP or your Python HTTP. Those are simple web servers too. Nginx is just a more powerful one. And it's sitting there on top of your rented server, and it's got some configuration. So if I go to, oops, so the Nginx. So I'm in that Nginx directory, I'm gonna clear, and I'm gonna do a listing of this directory. So this is where the configuration for Nginx actually happens. Yeah.
How does, so your terminal says root at CS260?
Yes.
I know that that is your domain.
Yeah.
So mine still says my user app.
The IP address. So when you did your shell, you used your IP address to shell into it? Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
So if you had used your domain name, it would say.
Yeah. It'll say CS260. That's what it's for. Yeah.
And are those the same?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, doesn't matter. Just remember. Yeah.
Just a quick question. So when we're moving into this directory, and also into the directory to add like HTML files to our website.
Yes, it's a good question. Everyone's asking about it.
Is that like part of something different? Because if I were to say show the list of directories in my root file, like is there a way to get through it that way, or do you have to type in directory?
So I'm not quite sure what question you're asking, but I think
Just
I know the
directory
answer.
here, if you were to show all of the directories within root at CS260,
Yes.
is there a way to get to it, or do you have to type that directly?
So your question is like, is there different, does the file system look different depending on which
Right.
user you are, is your question, right? And the answer is no. It's one file system, it's all the same. Now, it might be hidden, you might not be able to see portions of the file system for whatever reason, but it's not like there's an alternate universe going on there, right? So if I do like an LL of like /, which is the root, it's gonna look exactly the same for me coming in as the root user as it would be like the Elias Jensen user or something like that. Clear, do a list here. Now, one thing I want you guys just really touch quickly on, this has nothing to do with yet. Oh man, you almost took out that computer. Is this right here. So I did, when you do the extended listing with the -LA directory, it will show you what type of file it is, what the rights are on that, and it will show you who owns that thing. So there's been a lot of questions about like, oh, it gives me permission to deny. And that's because you're actually not the root user and you're trying to modify something that's owned by the root user. And that's going to just reject you immediately. This is really important for like this directory here where the configuration is, because you want to modify that and also modify one where all the content is on the web folder where the content is. And it's almost always going to be the root user that controls those things. So you have to either come in and log in as the root user or use sudo in front of your commands whenever you're going to modify anything. And sudo just means you are doing this as the root user. So super user do is what that means. Yeah.
If you can just use sudo, what's the point in not letting, like, for other people, like, what's the point in not letting them?
Yeah, the point is that you're making a conscious decision to do something as a root, is why they encourage you to do sudo. So that you don't accidentally like delete something. Like if I did like delete and try to delete the root, like the whole file system, it wouldn't let me do that unless I put sudo in front of it. Yeah.
Well, it'll also ask you for your password the first time you see one session.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. Depending on how your operating system's actually set up and what it is. But yeah, that's another protection there. Good. Okay, so that's it. So this is Nginx's configuration directory, right? So you got to remember where this is, ECT, it's like the etc. stuff, Nginx. And then the directories you really care about here are just actually, okay, so I don't want you to actually learn Nginx. I would not encourage you to learn Nginx. It's kind of old technology and you're not going to do it. We're just using it as a web server. So I don't want you to get hung up figuring out all this stuff unless you're like, gee, I'm feeling like discovery today and Nginx might take and go for it. But the only thing you actually have to know about in here is this site available directory, because that's where the one configuration file is that I want you actually to mess with. And that's default. Okay. Now, Messing with this file is highly dangerous. You get it wrong, your website's not going to work anymore. And it might be as simple as like putting a colon in there by accident when you're like saving the file. I know it's store the whole thing up, and if you're like trying to pump the whole file, trying to figure it out. So I encourage you before you make any significant change to make a copy of it and keep a backup. So you've got 2 backup files already there. Yeah, there was some big thing. Yeah.
I was just gonna ask, if it's something as simple as a colon being left in there, couldn't you just go in and remove the colon and everything be fine?
If you knew that it was the colon that was the problem. But you're going to be looking at, 10,000
Yeah.
lines and you're like, where is the problem?
Okay, so if you remembered where it was, theoretically, you could fix it.
If you remembered where it was, you probably wouldn't have left it in there in the first place, right?
Fair enough.
What's up?
Yeah, when I was trying to like strip out my site and looking up on Google how to do something, told me to like mess with that, and then it like messed everything up, and so I had to find where I changed it and get.
Yeah, it can be super painful. So this is one of those things where if you make the backup, you can make mistakes and it doesn't matter. You just go back to the backup and restore it. So that's really good practice. So I'm going to do my less here of default and bring this up. Okay, so the way the configuration works, and it's super powerful. There's way more than I'm ever going to cover here, but the main thing you don't know about is there's basically server blocks, right? And within those, it's telling it how Nginx is actually listening to things. So this one block, and there's multiple blocks here, and they kind of like take precedence over each other and how they actually execute. This is your default block. So this is what it's going to use if there wasn't anything else here. And they say it's going to listen on port 80. I never explained ports, but this is a really important concept, is that you've got a server and you allow connections to come in or out from that server by opening up a port. And there's like 65,000 possible ports that you can set up on any server. Some of those port numbers are specifically defined for things like 80 is HTTP, or yeah, HTTP. 443 is HTTPS, secure HTTP. SSH is 22. And if you go to like the Internet Naming Authority, they'll tell you like all the defined ones you do. And you don't use those because they're defined. And if you use them, then you're really doing weird things. But then there's a whole bunch of ones that you can just use for whatever you want. So that starts at like 5,000 or something like that. And you can just use those. And like we use it when you run your server, you're on like port 8080 or something like that. It's just because it's just like a random port to say, I'm going to talk to another computer through that port, or I'm going to open up this port on my computer so someone can come in and talk to you. So those are just the numbers basically of your network connection. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's going to listen on port 80, and it's going to pull its information from what is specified as root. So it's going to, there's our var www HTML directory, and that's where it's going to look for the files that it's going to serve up there. And then it's going to say, if somebody asks for something, first try the files to see if there's something that matches there. And then if not, and I can't find it, then you return a 404. That's an HTTP error for, huh? I don't know. Sorry, I don't have it. That's mean file not found is what that means. And then I skip index. So this is the default file that it will serve up if no file is specified. So that's why when you say, just go to my server and I don't specify index.html, it magically somehow, loads up index.html. It's not magic, it's that right there. That's what tells it to actually pull up the index.html. So that's the basic server configuration for Nginx right there. I see lots of nodding. Feeling good about that? Good, okay. So this one actually has some more configuration. So now I've got another one in here. So this is the one when I ran certbot and did the -- Nginx flag that told certbot, not only do I want a certificate, but I want you to configure Nginx to actually host that certificate. And it went here into this file because I did a sudo, so it had rights to actually go do it. And it actually stuck this block in here. And it's saying, I'm going to listen right here, hidden down at the bottom. I'm going to listen on not the port 80, which is the default HTTP port, but I'm going to listen on 443, which is the secure HTTP port. And then it provides the information for actually where that certificate is that it's going to use to be able to answer requests. You don't have to know anything about this. This just tells you where those files are, and this is all just Nginx configuration to actually host those certificates there. But it does tell you where it stored those certificates. If you want to go look at them, they're right there, those locations there. Yeah.
How did you this file? Is this in default?
It is default. That's the name of it. Yeah, it's weird. I think default would be like a
I
direct.
had default as like a direct inside it, like
And then there should be Nginx / available dash websites / default. Okay. All right, and it's listening. It's looking for files in the same place. That HTML directory uses the same index there. And then we have a little bit different thing. So up on the default, the server name was underscore, which just meant if you can't find anywhere else, use this. This is saying if somebody comes in and is looking for my host name, because I went and installed CS260.click, cool, then that's the rule that's going to match. So you can come into server on any host name as long as that host name is pointing to your server. So I could actually have 1,000 different host names all pointing to the same IP address, right? And then I could have different routing rules based upon what host name they actually came in on. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm gonna stop asking that. No one's gonna say, no, that doesn't make sense. That's stupid. Can't believe you asked that question. All right, so that's the rule right there. This is my basic rule so that when I actually go right here and go to cs260.click, I hit that rule. It said, oh, cool, I know what you're asking for. And I'm going to feed you over to that HTML directory over in the var www HTML directory. And I'm going to host up the index.html file, which is this one right here. Yeah.
So if your computer had connectivity and everything, it was like trying to load into that and then it just timed out, would that mean that there was something wrong with that file that you were just talking about?
No, there's a billion reasons why it might time out. One, it wouldn't time out if the file wasn't there. You'd get a 404, right?
Okay.
So it'd be like, I don't know. That was, remember those rules right
Yeah.
here? If I can't find it in the files directed by the root, then I'm going to say 404. So timeout is more likely that like your internet connection's bad, can't find the server that you're actually talking to, your host name doesn't match to the IP address that you're trying to get to. Those are all common reasons why it would. Yeah.
If we want the starting page to be like one of our different HTML files, can you change
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, if you don't like HTML, you just want it to be H, you could totally go do that. It'd be weird, but you could totally do that. And you can put multiple files there on. So you could, if this one's here, use it, and it's in order. It'll just go down the list and pick whatever way. In fact, the original configuration had that really funky one, that Debian.html or whatever it is. Yeah, that was their original. Yeah, in the back, please.
So I think you might have answered the question. So it doesn't have to be that file path then? It doesn't have to be in that HTML directory?
The root, it has to find the index.html in that root directory.
Okay.
Right up there at the top.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it'll look for it in there. All right, so that's the one, and I didn't create that. Nginx created that for me, right? I didn't do anything for that. When I ran certbot, it did that. And it also stuck in this second server rule right here, which says if you come in here and your host name is, cs260.click, and I'm listening on port 80, then I'm going to return a 301. So these are, that's why I probably should cover HTTP first. These are all status codes for HTTP, which means redirect. You're in the wrong place. You ever been to a website and you go to a page and all of a sudden it flickers and goes somewhere else? You just got hit by a redirect. That's exactly what it's doing. Say, if you're coming in on port 80, which is the insecure connection, right? Not the secure HTTP. I don't want you here. I don't want to ever support a connection which is not a secure one. So it's saying, now I'm listening on port 80 with this click, and I'm just going to return a 301. That's the status code. Remember, 404 was not found. 301 is redirect. And I'm going to redirect you to this location, which is the same place you just asked for, but instead I'm going to tack an S on there and tell you to talk to me on the secure port, which is the rule above. And that's totally cool. That means you can't actually talk to my server except for a brief moment, and then I'll just redirect you back if you're not on a secure connection. And and then I have one more. So when I first came to class, I did all my work on CS260 leahjensen.com. And then like I bought 260.click because I wanted to be a click address, so I'd be like you guys. And I didn't want to support this one anymore, but I was afraid that there'd be people out there who actually had that address and they're like, trying to talk to me on it. So I just wrote this little simple rule in my Nginx file that says, if you come in on Leah's Jensen, then return, there's my redirect again, to CS260. So if you hit my guy with that, he's going to redirect you over. Yep.
So does that first redirect rule mean that if someone were to type in like HTTP, go to your website and go to your domain, and it should automatically?
Yes.
connect to HTTP?
Yeah, this will cause that to happen. Should have knew it. If you can talk to my server on just HTTP without the secure connection, then I've got a bug in my Nginx configuration. So that's the configuration right there. Okay. So for your labs that you're going to do throughout the semester, you're going to do throughout the semester, you're going to create subdomains. So you bought a host name, And that host name, and it allows you to create as many subdomains off from that thing as you want. You can have, like cats.lee.click or, dogs.lee.click. And you can actually create subdomains of subdomains. You can have nice cats, nice.cats.lee.click. And so for this class, each one of our labs is going to be a different subdomain to give you experience with that. So what you've got to do then is there's two ways you can do it. You can actually create what's called a wildcard certificate, which allows you to access anything that's a subdomain of the base certificate, or you can get a certificate for each one of the subdomains. We're going the route of making you get a certificate for each one of the subdomains. And you're looking at me like, why are you making me do that? Think of the experience. Think of getting a wildcard certificate is actually a little bit more tricky, but you can do it. Certbot actually supports that too. You just have to put, some records in your DNS or allow Certbot to actually access your DNS, which I didn't want to get into, and for good reasons, it's a little harder to configure. But that's what allows it to actually create that. So in order to do that, so if I quit out of here, and I've got my little command right here. This thing is in my way. Is that showing? Yeah, it's showing up for you too. I want you to move. I want you to move somewhere far, far away. Like, how about there? Is that good? No, it's not good. Can't move the mouse fast enough. There we go. We'll just leave it there. Okay, so I'm going to run this command right here. Except I'm going to change it from Lee S. Jensen. That's old. Oh my gosh, I have all sorts of things in the way. So I'm going to change that from leesjensen.com to my cs60.click. So this is the one I bought, and I'm going to tell Certbot I want another certificate. And it's just really that easy. So I'm going to do sudo, even on root, doesn't matter. Either way, it'll work. I'm going to call Certbot. I'm going to tell it I want to configure Nginx and also to create a certificate using this domain. Yeah, she tells me that domain. Yeah.
Have you already created lab 1?
No. But what do you mean, like created it?
Well,
There's nothing on my machine. There's nothing, anything for it. I'm just going to create a certificate at this point. Okay. And I'll show you in a minute what you actually do with that thing. Okay. So I'm going to push that. Cross your fingers. We're making mistakes. We're requesting a certificate. It's going to say, yes. I love it when things work. Awesome. Okay. So it actually created it. And it says everything's successful. It should tell me I should give it some money. I'll think about doing that. Feel good. It tells me where it's saved, certificate, everything's cool. If I do like certbot.certificates, I think that's the right command. Yeah, it'll actually tell me all the certificates that I actually have allocated. So I've got one for just my root domain, my Apex, and then I've got one here for lab.cs260. Cool, huh? That is so, I can't like express to you how cool that is, that you can just run that one command and it works. Having spent weeks wrangling with things just to do exactly what it did. That's cool. All right, so I'm back in my default config for Nginx again. And I'm looking down here and I've got a new section. There it is. Okay. So it looks pretty similar, but now I'm listening. The server name is lab1.cs260.click. It's pointing to the same directory, so they're going to the same place. I'm just listening to a different domain name here now. And it's got the same index file, and then my certificates, and then listening on 443. So I'm cool. That's awesome. But the problem is I don't want it to go to the same place. I want it to go somewhere else. So I'm going to quit out of this because less isn't going to help me. And I'm going to VI instead. And I'm going to go down to my section. And it also created a redirect section for me too. I didn't point that out, but it does both of them. So instead of having it go to this location right here, I'm going to actually insert and I'm going to put a lab1. In fact, let's just put it right in. Let's put it right here. So is that clear? So instead of going to the HTML directory, I'm going to the same directory, but under lab1. And then I'm going to save that, escape out, do my right quit. Everything's cool there. If I go over here and click on this right now and go to lab1.cs260.click. Sorry, that's really small. Didn't help. Oh, yeah. There's that general rule of like, I don't know where I'm going, so I'm going to just send you to that default one. Remember the default rule? So that's not what I want, but that's okay. I'm glad it doesn't like give you a 404. But now we're going to change over to, so I've done my configuration. I got my cert. I changed my file to tell it where I want it to go. I want it to go to lab 1. So now I'm going to change over to my content directory, which is var www. Yeah.
Real quick, can I ask something about debugging? If for whatever reason you're getting errors when you're doing all this, run nginx-t inside that nginx directory and it'll give you more information.
What does it do? I've never run that command. Does it actually dump a file out or does it actually print it?
It just prints out a command line. It will give you syntax. Like I just ran it right now and it says my syntax is okay.
Oh, awesome.
But oftentimes it will point you to different places and it will be like, oh, go check out this.
So if you do put that colon in there, you can run that and it will say, there's a colon here.
Hopefully help guide you a little more.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to make a directory here and I called it lab 1, right? You're all following me. We're doing pair programming. It's like mob programming. Awesome. Lab 1. Okay, and then I'm going to just do a printf here and I'm going to do h1 lab 1. I'm going to redirect that out to an index.html because that's the file it's going to be looking for. Out of that, make sure it looks good. Everything's cool. All right, bets it's going to work. None of you are betting. Oh, man, my first fail, we just made a mistake. Lab 1 is not returning that. Oh, yes, thank you so much. Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, you change that config file, it doesn't automatically come. Who said that? Thank you very much. Dude, I have treats for you. Pass it back. There you go, thank you. I forgot to restart the server. I can do that anywhere, it doesn't matter because it's just a service. So I can do service Nginx and do a reload. Feeling better. That's probably why my page didn't 404 me too. Oh, damn, I love you. You're the best. Jose saved me last time with the dongle and you saved me today with that. So there you go. That is, you take a picture of that. D9 is done.
Question.
Yes.
So does your server ever automatically reload or is it just?
It won't automatically reload that config, I don't think, unless you know differently.
So you don't need to create another A record for the new.
No, as long as you have that wildcard record. That's why
What's the wild?
the one that has the star in front of it. You created 2 records in your DNS server.
So then if you don't have a wildcard record,
You have to, yeah. This whole thing about using different subdomains won't work. That's the wildcard says I'm going to allow subdomains, and I know to map anything that's a subdomain to this IP address. So yeah, that's a really important point. You can bring that up because you have to have that. Now you got to put something fun in here, something better than lab 1, but that's basically it. So that's D9. So let's jump into the longer one. We have about half an hour to hit this. And let's talk about GitHub. You guys know who this is? And the answer's up there, right? I wasn't, so I looked up how to say his name. I want to make sure I'm saying it right. And he basically says it depending on which language. He's in 3 different ways. But my favorite way is the actual Swedish way, which he is. And guess how you pronounce it? Linus. Linus. Are you catching that? Linus. Now we have Tim Berners-Lee, we have Holcomb-Lee, and now we have Linus Torvalds, right? I'm just saying that there's kind of something going on here. If you're thinking about, maybe naming one of your children, it's a really good name. They're gonna have a huge, bright future. Works great for a girl's name as well as a boy's name. He's awesome. We're good to go. Yeah. So he wrote Linux. He wanted to make a free version of Unix, basically. So he was the driver. He didn't write the whole thing himself, although significant portions of it actually were written by him, especially the kernel, mainly the kernel. And as he was writing all this stuff, which is actually the backbone of the internet, he was using this proprietary tool to keep track of his code. And they made fun of him. You're an open source guy and you're using a proprietary tool to keep track of your code. He's like, okay, thanks. So he went home that weekend and wrote Git. And that's where we get Git from. And there's this really fun thing. If you want to know what Git is named after, that's a good thing to go discover where that actually comes from. So there you go. So we love Linus. He's amazing. So this is the important thing with most technologies is getting a model in your head. And once you have that model in your head, they don't seem so daunting. It's not like this weird black magic kind of stuff. It just pushes to that. So there's two main things that Git does. The first thing to think about is it's just a directory of files with versions. So you're already familiar with a directory of files, right? You know, like you're going to the file system and now you can play around the terminal. You can change around directories and stuff like that and see all the files that are there. You're familiar with that concept. Git just overlays that with a tracking of the versioning of the files there so that you can skip back to previous ones. You can do diffs between them to see how they've changed. You can write comments about them and that kind of stuff. That's all it is. And I can show this to you because you can go to any directory on your computer. I'm going to exit out of my server here. And we're going to go to my user directory, which is doing tilde. I'm going to make a directory called junk and change into junk. And then I'm going to call Git Init. And all that does is just say, you want to version this directory. Great, I've done that for you. And if we actually do an ls or an ll here, you'll see that there's this little new hidden directory called .git. And that's where it's going to store all of its version information. So if you do things here, it's going to squirrel away all sorts of kind of version junk in that directory. And that's a really fascinating thing to actually learn how it does all those diffs and does it incredibly fast and efficiently. That's like a master's thesis in and of itself. So now I can actually use the Git commands. So one of them, so what we need to do for the project is actually do a portfolio, right? Yeah, we're going to do a portfolio. So this is a terrible place to do Git. I should not have done junk. It's all right. I'll show you Git really quickly here, just with a simple file. So now I can do my I can do echo hello. Oops, not just the terminal, but we're going to actually like pump that out somewhere to one.txt. Right? And because I have my shell, I've actually got it set up so that's kind of integrated with Git. It will show me things like, oh, this is like a repository. There's actually versioning going on here. And I'm on what's called the master branch. You can have different branches and it gets really complicated. Don't worry about that right now. Just think you're always working on the master of the main branch. And then this little X here means, hey, something's changed in this directory. That's all that means. And the thing that's changed, if I do git status, it'll tell me actually what has changed. It says, oh, you have an untracked file that I don't know about. It's called one.txt. And it's really helpful. It's like, oh, if you want to like include this so it'll be committed, do an add. And you can do git add and then the file name will do it. There's also a shortcut to just do git add and then dot, which means like add everything that needs to be added. Great. And now if I do git status again, it says, oh, great. I know about this file now. I'm going to use it in my versioning scheme. It's what's called staged, which means it's ready to be committed, right? So I can have files that aren't staged, I'm just tweaking with, files that I'm staged, which means I'll commit a version of it. And then there's things that are actually committed then, and there's no change on it. So it says you got one of these files here, and now I can do git commit, and then I can do -m to provide a message. And I can say, new. Please do really meaningful comments. There's really like blogs about how to do meaningful Git comments. Encourage you to go discover those. And there you go. It says, okay, I added that file and notice my little X went away, which means it now, if I do git status, it says, hey, everything's clean. There's nothing going on here. But if I do git log, it will actually show me, and my stupid guy is in my way again. It'll actually show me that there was a commit done and it assigns this number. It's like, it's what they call a SHA. It's using the SHA hash algorithm, which is assigned to it, which uniquely identifies this change or this version of thing. That's what that big, huge thing is, that yellow thing is there. And then it's saying, you're at the top, this is where you're currently working, because if you start working with versions, you're going to move around where your head is, right? But I'm at the very top of it because I've only got one file. And this is my master branch. Cool, huh? So I can escape out of that. If I go back to my pump out command here, and I say hello again, then notice it's X again. And if I do git status, then it's showing me, I know about this file, but you've modified it. I'm like, yes, I did. So we're going to do my commit again, but I'm going to tack on an A here, which means I'm adding it to my stage, which means I want to commit these files. and I'm providing the message. So new again. Awesome. Now if I do my git log, you'll see I've got two versions of this file. I've got my original one, and then I've got my new one. So I've got my new, you can see the comment on the bottom one, and the comment on the top one. Now, Git has like a billion different configuration things. My favorite one is to actually make git log much prettier. So I actually have my own little, I have got to get this guy out of my way. Got my own little command line. There's just like 20 different options on git log so that it just prints it as a single line. So I can actually see those things here. Want to do another one? Because it's so much fun. That's it. No, you don't. You're like, I hate this. I don't want to do another one. Oops, we're still doing one. Again, and again. Awesome. And then I do my commit again, right there. New again. Right? If I do my git log, my abbreviated version, I've now got 3 versions. And I can actually do things like diff. So I can do git diff, and I can do head, and then do like tilde. So 1, which is the current version on the head. And then I can do head tilde, 3. Oops, didn't know 3 because that's not 1, 2. And it'll show me my differences there. So my difference between hello and hello again, it's showing me what was added and deleted from those 2 things. I can actually move back, so I can restore to one of those guys if I want to, and then commit it as the new file on top of that. And it allows you to totally do all that versioning. So that's the first part of what Git actually does. This is just a version repository on any folder that you want in your operating system. And that by itself is pretty cool. I'm going to remove that directory using rm-recursive enforce on my junk directory, so I don't leave any junk around. And then I'm going to move into my my working directory. So this is just how I kind of set up my code. I always have like work, and then I have play and other things like that. And then I also have a source. And then here I've got different things. So I've got like my work stuff, and then I've got this class, and then I've got stuff just for my own other website. So if I go to CS 260, and what I want to do for the deliverable for this, which you have to submit, is actually create a portfolio for yourself. And so I'm going to create that. So the way I've got my code set up is I've got like my README files, these are like my notes and everything. And then for everything that I want to dump out to my website, I've actually put into my Git repository under a folder called www. Now, you got to answer for yourself how you're going to organize your code, whatever makes sense for you, whether you want to use one repository, whether you use a repository for each one of your projects, whether you want to use like all CSS stuff is in one project and all the unit stuff for JavaScript is in a different project, whatever works best for you, right? If you have more repositories, it means that there's more maintenance to manage those repositories. But if you have only one repository, then everything's jammed into that one repository, and it might be far harder to actually navigate that. So play around with that, kind of develop your own style. It's kind of like where you store all your term papers and stuff like that. You got to figure out what works for you and works for your team too. You got to collaborate on that. Okay, so in that www directory, I'm going to put my portfolio in here. Now, there's 2 different ways that you can actually, oh, sorry, totally skipped the next part. So Git by itself is cool, but the second, remember I said there's 2 things. One is you're just versioning the directory. The second thing is that you can actually collaborate. So it's a distributed repository, basically. And the way that it does this is a really simple concept. It just makes a clone. So you have your repository, just like we just did with the junk directory, and then you can clone that to some other machine, which is going to make an exact copy. That little Git directory and all the files with it is going to get copied over into this other machine, or even this other location on your hard drive. You can actually do this just with 2 directories on your hard drive. And that's Git clone causes that to actually happen. Okay, so if we just had a team of John, Paul, and Rigo, right, and they wanted to like collaborate on their music, then all they have to do is like say, in this case, Paul's going to be like, he's going to be the central repository. We don't know Paul is like the piece of the foundation. And so when John makes it, they each got a clone of it, and when John makes a change, he pushes it over here to Paul, and then Paul has that change, and then Ringo can pull it from Paul, so he can get the change. And that way, all 3 of them can be working independently on different things and share those changes with each other by just modifying. Basically, when the changes come across, it's as if that person actually did it on that machine, and just like I was, creating the versions of it, and it's just reporting that to the Git information. And then if there's ever a conflict, like they're both trying to let write let it be at the same time, then you've got to resolve that conflict and tell, okay, which version is going to win, what text you actually want there. That's conflict resolution, which I'll show you. But that's basically how it works. So it's a distributed version directory. That's all Git is. And then there's like 6 trillion command line switches to totally mess you up and make things hard. But that's the basic idea. So if you have that framework in your mind, you're good. Now, this one's interesting because I'm actually got 3 team members trying to share files across. Don't you think it'd be much easier if one of them wasn't like the central repository that everybody was pushing and pulling to, and instead it was just up there on the cloud somewhere, and you could just use that one, and that's not actually a person, but everyone's just pushing and pulling from that thing? That's a great idea, right? Yeah, okay, enter GitHub. So back in the, man, when was that? It was in the 2000s sometime. The guy's, hey, what if I put a website up that all it was the central repository for all source code in the world? And ta-da, GitHub was born. That's exactly what it is. So instead of pushing to each other directly, they all push to a simple repository, and they pull from that simple repository. So this is called your remote, right? You're going to set that guy up. It's like my repository knows that I can push and pull to this other repository that's out there somewhere. So you set that remote up, and then you push and pull from it. So you commit locally, and then when you're happy with what you have here and you want to share with the world, you push it out and pull it down. Recognition looks good. Okay, this also works if you're not on a team. So like if you're trying to do what we're trying to do in this class, which is actually have a development server and a production server. Your development server is on your lap right now. Your production server is up there at DigitalOcean. And you want to actually get things from here to there. Now you can use SCP and copy that correctly across, but that's not such a great idea. There's all sorts of problems of tweaking things when you didn't mean to and actually stepping on things when you didn't mean to. So a real like production professional system, you would push to a repository and it would actually run all sorts of automated checks on your stuff to make sure your syntax is right, to make sure there's no bugs. It would run hours of tests against that code to make sure it all looks good. And if all that passed, then it's going to pass it to a manual check, which is going to be some guy who's like reviewing your code and make sure there's no security holes in it. And he's going to give it the thumbs up and it's going to push the gate button. And that system is going to then pull it down onto that production server. So that's what's called like a continuous integration or continuous deliveries kind of system. It all works because you're pushing, the whole team pushing to the central repository. So that's it. That's GitHub right there. Okay, we already talked about how you're going to structure your repositories. We didn't actually answer it, but you know. Okay, so what I actually want to do then is go and do this. You guys ready? No enthusiasm at all. It's like, it's because I turned these lights off, right? That's it. I told you, JJ, we shouldn't have turned those lights off. Sorry, what were you saying? Take it. It's like a fire hose. If Jensen would just slow down a little bit, I'd be able to like get it. All right. Get it. Yeah, there's all sorts of jokes you can get. I made that in the, I don't know if anyone caught it. I did it in the Discord. Nobody said anything. Did you get that? I got nothing. Okay, so you got to go create your account on GitHub, and then it's gonna like, this is just my home page here, and I've got all my little repositories that I've been working on lately. And if you want to create a new, so you can create your repository here, but in order to push it up into GitHub, you have to. Sorry, here is local. You guys got that right. In order to push it up to GitHub, you have to go to GitHub anyways to create your repository. So it's all, you can do that and you can hook them up together by saying what your origin remote is and all that stuff. But it's way easier just to start up in GitHub and then clone it down. Okay. So I would suggest highly that's how you always do it. Don't init on your own machine unless you really have to. Go init up there on GitHub and then clone it down to your machine. It's way easier workflow. Okay, so I'm going to create a new one. We're going to call it portfolio. I can spell portfolio. Too much pressure, man. Like having to spell and type in front of 1 million people. I don't know what to do. And then there's all these options. So the free one is public. If you're not free, you can make them private. I like everything public. I'm right up there with Linus. Me and him, we're strong. We're going together. And then you can add this README file, and you can also add a Git Ignore, and you can choose a license that you want associated with your repository. So the README file is just that README.markdown file, which like will show up in GitHub to give like instructions and notes about your code. That's what that's for. The Git Ignore is like when you're pushing things, if there's files you don't want to actually get included in the repository, you just put it in that Git Ignore file, and then it doesn't get copied up. So for example, you're going to get a key when you do your weather lab here in a couple weeks. That key you do not want to push into the repository because it's your key. You actually went to their website and got it. And if you push it up there and it's a public repository, bam, everybody in the world can get it. And actually GitHub is super smart. They'll scan your code and they'll be like, hey, there's a key here, and they'll send you an email. I know people who have actually put their like Amazon root level tokens in their source code and pushed it out into a public repository. Very bad idea. Within minutes, that key will be taken and they will be on your Amazon account, and they'll be allocating servers all over the world, basically racking up your bill to tens of thousands of dollars, literally within minutes of that happening. So make sure whenever you push anything to that there is nothing which is, security wise. And one way to do that is to make sure it's in your Git Ignore so that you don't ever actually put it in there. Better thing is to keep those keys entirely out of your code directory. Better is to like not even have them on your machine. But anyway, that's my little spiel there with that. And then choose a license, so like MIT or whatever you want, Apache or whatever. So I'm going to create my repository. Yay, portfolio is created. Notice it created my little default README file there. That's cool. And then I need to get this thing down. So I need to clone it down. So if I click this here, and it will give me the URL to actually clone it. And I just click that, copied, everything's cool. Go back to my server, and I'm going to do git clone, and then that URL. And my thing's in the way.
Stay on Git for this.
Do I want to, sorry?
You're still on Git. You want to stay on Git for this?
Do I want to be in this directory? Yeah. This is where I got like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm going to be Git within Git. Dang it. Okay, you're right. No, that's good.
That's why I was asking. That's the way you want to do it.
That is not how I want to do it. I don't want to have my repository within a repository. So I'm going to come out here to my source directory and do that again.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've got my code. If I was actually doing this for myself, I wouldn't create another repository. I would just go create a directory within my existing CS260 repository for my profile and put it in there. But so I can show you how to create repositories. We'll put it out here. Yeah, in the back.
How would you remove that local repository? Like in that case, it's just say you want to be in that directory, is it just RM and dot?
Yeah, it's like you can just delete it. Because remember that .git file, that directory in there has everything in it. So if you just want to blow it away, you can just kill it by just deleting that directory, move to a different place and do a clone from there, and that would work fine. Okay, so we're going to clone it, cross our fingers, everything looks cool. Now, when you do this for the first time, it's going to actually ask you a few things. I've already done this on my computer. I've said get up, but it's going to ask you like to provide your credentials to actually, well, this is a public repository, so pulling down, it won't ask me to provide credentials, but when I push up, it's saying, oh, you have to authenticate in order to do that. So it'll ask for credentials and stuff like that. And that's when your personal access token comes in. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute here, assuming I can talk about 5 times faster than I'm currently talking. So now I've got my portfolio directory. If I cd into portfolio and do my list, there's my README file that I had right there. Cool. So what this has actually done is if I do stream, remote. So it's showing me who the remote is that I'm talking to, and I think it's list. No, it is. Anyways, I can't remember the command. I was going to show you that it actually has the mapping. I thought it was list. Add, remove, set, prune. No, I'm not seeing there. So there's a command that you can do, and I'm pretty sure it's git remote, that will actually show you the actual URL that it's talking to. So that's that connection from Ringo up to GitHub, right? There's that pointer there. Okay, so I'm good to go. So now I can do that same thing I did before, which was like our printf, like that. So I just created an index HTML file. I don't know if you saw that, but I just found a command that I had in my buffer before, popped it in there. It's all about Professor Lee Jensen. And now I'm good to go. Notice my X is there. So I'm going to do my commit, my git commit AM. I'm going to add it and put a message on in the same command. And this is, first comment. All in caps, of course. Oop. First comment. 2 quotes on there. I need to get rid of my other quote. Git commit AM first. All right, there you go. We've added it, and then I can do git add dot, sorry. The initial one, you actually do have to add it so that it actually knows about it. And then the -A afterwards is to add it to the staging for it. So that's what I was messing up there. So now I've added that file. I can do my git first, and you've got that there. And now I've got a new command to introduce you to, and this is push. So now I've committed this, my repository is all intact, everything's good. And I'm gonna push my setup of repository up to GitHub. Ta-da! So now if I come back here to GitHub, you can see this is what it was before. And if I refresh, I've now got a new file there. Thank you. That's the cue. That's what I was looking for. I need that reinforcement, man. I got to get it. I live off your energy. Like, all right, so that's it. And I can do the same thing here. So I can actually add a file here, create a new file. We're just going to call this, 1.html. And we're going to come in here and we're going to be like, yay, HTML. Good to go. And if I scroll down to the bottom here, there's a commit button. So this is actually using the GitHub interface, the exact same thing that I just did down on my development server. And now I've got that file here. Okay, so if I go back over here to portfolio, I've got just my directories here. And so now I'm going to do something funky. I'm gonna VI. Let's not use VI. Let's just output over the file. Okay, let's VI index.html. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to insert. And I'm going to put an X right here. And I'm going to escape and right quit. Okay, so I've made a change here. Now my X is there again. So I'm going to do my commit. AM. And this is like X. This is a world's worst comment. I mean, saying what you just did in the file is like totally stupid. You need to know why you did it in the file. But I've got that there. And so I've got it committed. So if I do my git status, it says everything's cool. And so now if I'm going to do my git push, I'm going to get this error. And it's going to be like, okay, you both been working in different places, right? You added one file here and I tweaked one file here. So I've now got two different commits. So I need to know, okay, what's going on? So there's a call called git fetch, which won't pull anything down. It will just fetch what the other repository knows about. Okay, so it pulled that down without changing anything on my computer. And if I do my log again, it'll actually graphically show me what's going on here. So it's saying origin master, that's my remote, right? They actually created a new file called 1.html. And you're over here, that branch, that little line going off there with that cool ASCII art, is my little commit that I did when I added the X. So there's two ways to merge this conflict. The one is that you can do what's called a merge command, and the other one is you can do a rebase command. So the merge command will take those things and it'll look at them and using this really smart algorithm that Linus came up with. I love saying that name. That Linus came up with in the middle of the night on Tuesday. He just said, okay, we're going to figure out how to make these guys work together. As long as there's not a conflict, it'll merge it, everything will work. The other one is rebase. So if I do the merge, it'll actually, your branches go out like that and they'll come back in together. A rebase will basically say, take the changes you made, put them off to the side, pretend you never made them, hold down what they did, and then pretend that you made them after those changes were made and you actually knew about them locally. So it's rebasing where the original start is of their changes. Does that make sense? I like rebases better because it keeps it cleaner. You don't have all these little lines going all over the place. It's easier to see when things happen. So if I can rebase easily, I'll always do that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do git rebase. It says, oh, cool. Let's go look and see what that did. Now it's just a straight line. My little weird branch, it's gone. Because I pretended that the change that was made up on GitHub was actually done before I made my change. Actually, it was time-wise, but I didn't know about it. And I pulled it down, and then I made my change locally afterwards. So now I'm good to go. So we just did conflict resolution in like 3 minutes. That was amazing. It goes down all the way to the file level. So if you actually change two lines that are conflicting with each other, then you've actually got to open up that file and tweak what it says there to make sure that you got the changes that you actually want. Okay, so I push that up. And if we toggle back over here and refresh, and I come back into index.html, you can see that I've got my X there up on GitHub. Cool. Okay, that's cool. But what we really need, Professor Jensen, is this over on my production server so I can actually do it. So if I actually then go back to my prompt and shell back in. Sorry. Go back in here. So now I need a directory here of where I'm actually going to stick things. So I'm just going to put this right into my root. I've already got a source directory. That's awesome. So I'm going to use that. So now I'm on my development machine, pushed up to GitHub, and now I'm bringing it down to my production server. So now I'm on my source directory and I got nothing in here. So all I want to do now is clone or git clone, just like I did on my local server. And I want to paste that URL, which is from my repository in. Doing the exact same thing, it pulls it down there. So now if I do an ls, I got a portfolio directory, change in the portfolio directory, and there's all the files. That's cool, awesome. Okay, now all I gotta do is just copy that over to my lab1 directory. Does anyone remember what I created it as? So I do an ls var lab1. And I had my little file there. Okay, so all I'm gonna do then is copy -r, because I want to do it recursively, my portfolio. So go back directory, or I guess I can just do dot. So this directory right here, I want to copy that over to var www.lab1, lab1. Cool, awesome. Let's go check it out. Ta-da, all my files are there. That's cool, huh? You guys know what's going to happen next? If I get that, that's already open. Lab1. So that's there's probably, I don't know, 50 different posts on like Discord, like, how do I get my files over there? That's the approved way to do it. Like, that's like close to what you would do in a real production system. Now, in the last 10 minutes, I want to show you how you would actually do it so you never go on your server. So there's actually instruction on this on the Canvas course. This is totally not, I mean, there's no questions about the test, nothing like that. This is GitHub Actions. And this just allows us to automate that copy down and copy over step so that you don't have to do it. So whenever you check in, it automatically pushes the thing over. Okay, so to do that, you guys are so nice to clap. Like, I've never been in a class where people clap. Do you guys do that in your other classes? Is it just me? Yes. Just this class. You guys are awesome. Okay, so with GitHub Actions, you can actually set it up so that there's these little actions that happen. And I'm not gonna, I don't have enough time to actually step through it. So I'm just gonna show you what I did over in my other repository, my 260 repository. So with GitHub Actions, you can actually create these things. So you can come in here and create a workflow. And then you can also select a workflow. So I've already got one that's created. So I'm gonna go look at my, my root website workflow. And you can see all the times that I've executed it. And this is happening every time I check into this repository, this workflow runs. And so it's basically every time I change any HTML file, it automatically propagates out to my website. So I never have to think about it. I just check in, push, and done. Okay, so if we actually go look at this workflow, and there is, it's a little too big, so I don't know where. Oh, here it is right here, this little teeny link. This is a responsive website, so the UI looks totally different if your screen's bigger. There it is. So this is my workflow right here. And it's all documented up on the page. You can go and look at that. And it's pretty simple. If you just copy and paste what's there, it should work for your repository that you want doing. But basically what's saying is I give it a name, and it's saying on any push on my main branch, anything that's in my www directory, because that's how I organize my code, right? Double stars means in any subdirectory after that. This right here says that I can actually execute this workflow by not pushing code, writing GitHub by just pushing a button. I'm going to run these jobs. And this job is to, first of all, allocate myself an Ubuntu server. Like, it does that on the fly. It's actually like a little Docker server, but it does actually allocate the server. And then it checks out my files. This is the first step, using this action, which knows how to check out files. So it allocates that server, checks out all the files to it, does a clone in my repository. And then I use this step here, which is an SCP step. So this just came out of the marketplace. and said that this is basically going to do my SCP for me. So this is the step it's going to use. It's going to pull things from that www directory on that little server that it just created, and it's going to copy it to the remote directory, which is var www.html, using these parameters, which are the same parameters you would do if you were doing SCP yourself. So I have to supply the host, I have to supply the username, and then I have to supply the private key if you're using SSL keys, or the password if you're using passwords. And if it does that, then bam, it does that automatically for me. I check in, that rule gets matched, and it automatically pushes it out. Now this keys here, because you don't want to type your actual keys within a file. Remember, you don't do that. You don't check in code, because this is actually part of my repository now. It actually stores it in my repository. So that means it's also public. Anybody can see it. So how do you specify those keys? Well, if I come over here to I've got to get out of the big screen. To settings, sorry. And then down here to secrets. So for each repository, there's settings and secrets. And you can see that I click this button up here, new repository secret, and I created 3 different secrets, name them the same thing that they're in my action, and put that information in there. So host is going to be 260 click cs260.click. The key is going to be my SSH key, and then the user in this case is root. Now this is tricky because I need to use root in this case because I'm writing to a root directory, right? So if I use like a user who doesn't have rights to write in that root directory, that directory that's owned by root, then it's going to fail on the copy. So that's an important part to actually note there. So assuming that works then, which of course it will, like I can come here and we can exit out of here. And I can go back and go into my CS directory and go into my www and do a listing here. And I can do VI on index.html. And to just show you that there's no magic smoke and mirrors going on here, I'm going to go back from lab 1 just to here. And notice this is what my page looks like, right? So if I go back here and I insert and edit, and I'm going to put like an exclamation point right there. Out. Awesome. Now notice it changed, so I can do a git commit. Excitement. Push that up. Okay, now quick, we got to get back over to GitHub real fast. It's super fast. Oh man, we're not even in it. Like, we got to get to actions. We got, oh, there it is. So you can see excitement is running. He's like, yes, I'm running. I'm all excited. And you can come in here and you can actually see the details of the build. So it set up that job, it created the server, and now it's copying. Because I told it to copy everything every time. It's totally stupid and not very efficient. There's much better ways you could do this, but it works and it's simple and I can demo it in 2 minutes. It's copying everything over there. All my class projects and everything just got copied over there. So now, if I go back here, not that, and refresh. Come on, baby. Is it? Oh, I did it again on the title. I did that like last time I demoed something. Totally anticlimactic because it's like 2 pixels tall. But yes, thank you, whoever pointed out. There you go. So that's called a continuous deployment process. And that's what you would actually use if you were working like for a real company, or even if you're going to do stuff for yourself. You never want to be tweaking your servers themselves. That's the way to actually do it. So do that if you want, or copy them manually if you want. Either way, whatever works for you. But if you want to learn that extra complexity, it's totally worth the investment. Don't take off yet. I got to cover 2 more slides. And this guy has a super important question. I can see he's like busting at the seams.
So in this class, we just use the
Sorry.
From this point on, should we only use the local machine and not the server?
If you actually did something like this, yeah, you probably never.
Do we need to do this?
You do not have to do this.
Oh,
Totally optional. There will be, so you're gonna have to, when you get to actually running another server, like you get to you're running Node and Express on there, you're gonna have to go start those servers on your server. You can't do that, which is actually you probably could. You could like start something, you can control the whole thing, so you could, but I necessarily wouldn't do that. Okay, so let's just do a quick check-in. We did continuous deployment. So this is awesome. Our mental map is right here. We totally mastered servers. We got that one. We've mastered HTML. We know how that all works. We were supposed to talk about HTTP, but you're just going to go home and just totally go nuts on it. You get till 3 in the morning, you wake up and tell all your roommates You can't believe how cool we created. It's awesome. And astute people noticed that I added another one. I realized that our master brain diagram didn't have a device. This is our database, and that's actually a big part of this class. Is actually talking about database. So we're well on our way. Next week, we jump into the top one CSS and talk about that. And then it feels like we're halfway done. It's like half the box is got checked. So thank you very much.